So thank you so much for joining us tonight for this webinar on storytelling for success on Change.org. We've organised this session because we at Change.org we have thousands of petitions set up every month, and the one common thing that we see that is the kind of key factor for success for petitions that are set up on Change.org is great storytelling. So we really wanted to make sure that that everybody who's using the platform has the opportunity to tell a great story and to give their petition every chance of success. So my name is Carl Harris. I'm the Senior Community Engagement Manager at Change.org, and my background is in campaigning. As you can probably hear, I'm Australian. I'm originally not from the United States, but I've done a lot of campaigning both in Australia and in the United States on all kinds of issues, ranging from really small local things right up to national campaigns and international campaigns. And so I'm going to be taking us through the material today, but the lessons that are in this webinar are really things that have been learned by lots of Change.org campaigners over many years. So they really reflect a really broad body of knowledge that people have developed over a long period of time. And it's really the kind of the best information that Change.org campaigners have to share about storytelling. So just to go through what we're going to talk about tonight, we're currently in the introduction of the webinar. Next, we're going to talk about the human story. That's the kind of the personal story or the emotionally engaging part of the story that really grabs people's attention, engages their emotions, and gets them really interested in your petition up front. Then we're going to talk a little bit about the petition story. So the petition story is what you tell your supporters about your petition and why it's worth supporting and how it's going to make change. Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to put that all together and make all of that storytelling into a really great Change.org petition. And I'm also going to make sure that we leave plenty of time at the end for questions. Some people have already submitted questions through the online survey that was sent out. You can also submit a question at any time through the chat, and I'll either deal with it as we're kind of going through the material, or I'll wait until the end to answer questions. So just before we get into the material, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the kind of technology and how we can interact tonight. So you'll see in your, and I'm going to try and make use of a lot of this as we go through to make this as interactive as possible as it can be online. So you'll see on the left-hand side of your browser where you're looking at the slides, you've got a little chat window. You can use the chat window to kind of post a question, to flag something with me as we're going through, or to occasionally I'll be sort of asking questions, and you can also answer questions as we go through. And I'm really hoping that you'll use this chat box as we go along, because I really want to hear from you as we go through. So if we could start, would you mind if you can hear me and if you can see the chat box, just chatting your name to me as into the chat box. Hi, Christina. Hi, Penny. Hi, Josh. Thanks for joining us. Hi, Hank. Hi, David. Amanda, welcome. That's great. It seems like everybody has mastered the chat box. So the other thing that's over on the right is the raise your hand button. So I'm going to be using this. There's a few activities as we go through, and I'm going to be using the raise your hand button so that you can tell me when you're done and you're ready to move on. So if you can see that, could you just push the raise your hand button now? That would be great. Yes, everybody's got the hang of that. Excellent. Lots of hands up. That's good to see. That's great. So we're also going to do some polls as we go through, and you can answer polls just by clicking on the answer that you want to select on the screen as we go through. And we'll also be using an online form to start to build our stories as we go through this, this workshop. So if you go to change.org/storytelling, and you could open it up now just to have it ready to go, you can, there's a form there where you can answer a few survey questions, and that will start to build your story as we go through the workshop. So we'll be using that as we go through as well. So just to get started, I just wanted to start with a few poll questions to get a sense of who's in the room. So I'm going to launch the first poll question. So first question is, do you have a current Change.org petition that you're working on? So you can either answer, I've already started a petition, or I want to start a petition if it's something that you're interested in doing that you haven't done yet. Just give it a little while for people to put in their answers. Got 4 responses, 5 responses. Great. So it looks like we're pretty evenly split between people who have a current petition, or maybe a few more who have a current petition, and people who want to start a petition. But that's great. This workshop can be used for either you know, telling a story very clearly for a petition that you've already started and editing that copy and making it really, really tight and really clear. Or it's great to start thinking about, even before you've started your petition, to make sure that you're prepared to tell that story really well. So next survey question. How many Change.org petitions have you started before? So I'm really interested if we've got people who, there's a few people who said that already had a petition. If there's some repeat petition starters in the room. So the options are select never, if you've never started a petition before, 1 petition, 2 petitions, 2 petitions, or 3 or more petitions if you're a very active petition starter. Great. 6 responses, 7 responses. Great, pretty even spread. So, so there's a couple of people who've never started a petition before, also for 1 petition, 2 petitions, and it looks like there's one person who's started a lot of petitions on Change.org, 3 or more. I'd love to know exactly how many that person started. And final polling question before we get into the material. Could you tell me what your petition is about? So there's some options here for some of the most popular types of petitions on Change.org. So we've got animals, we've got health, we've got environment, we've got criminal justice, education, and women's rights. Or if it's not one of those, you could select other as well. And you can also select multiple things. So it could be a health and environment issue, both, for this question. Great, everybody's answered. So as usual, other is the most popular response. So I'm sorry I don't get to find out exactly what your petition is about, but we've also got a couple of petitions on women's rights, a couple on criminal justice, and 1 each on animals, health and education. That's great. So good to know what everybody's interested in and passionate about. So great, we'll get started. We'll start by talking about the human story. So I wanted to start by showing a video that I think really clearly indicates why good storytelling is really important for a good petition on Change.org. So I'm going to launch that video now, and we're going to watch that, and then we can talk through why it is great at telling the story that it tells.
I'm Laura McLinn. I'm the mommy of Jordan McLinn, who has a dream one day of growing up to be a firefighter. The day that we found out that Jordan had Duchenne was probably the worst day of our lives. We were not expecting that kind of news. We had been going to the doctor because Jordan just wasn't growing. And so we started with an endocrinologist, and one thing led to another. I remember my husband asking, "Are you sure that he has this?" And the doctor said yes. What that means for Jordan right now is that he is probably in the prime of his life. Very soon, if he doesn't get some special treatment, he's going to start declining physically. He will probably, without treatment, be in a wheelchair within just a few years. He doesn't have a normal life expectancy. That's really hard as a mom to know that your child might not be able to achieve those dreams because of a disease that would hold him back. Not because of lack of ambition or desire, but just because there's something physical going on in his body that won't allow it. Without right to try, if the FDA doesn't approve the drug that he needs in time, obviously time is not on Jordan's side. And without access to the drug sooner rather than later, it's not going to help Jordan. That's why right to try means so much to us. There is a drug that exists that can help him. It would slow the progression of the disease so that he could actually, he might still have muscle weakness, but he could live a long, productive life. Especially after Right to Try passed in Indiana, we had just this whole new level of hope, because Right to Try would give him access to the drug before going through all of those phases with the FDA. A lot of people need your help, not just Jordan, but anyone suffering from ALS, cancer, muscular dystrophy, any kind of terminal illness. You have an opportunity now to help Jordan and help millions of other people who are suffering from terminal illness. Please sign our petition telling the FDA to stop blocking the right to try.
Great. So could I ask you if you can hear me? Could you chat into the chat just in a word how watching that video made you feel? So one word, an emotion, how watching that video made you feel. Josh says he was moved. Hank, didn't get the video to load, I'm sorry. Amanda says angry. James says motivated. Christina says hopeful. And Penny says compelled. That's great. That's how I hoped you would feel after watching that video. Empathetic, says David. And look, I feel the same way watching that video, even after watching it a lot. And there's a reason why this video works and is able to make us feel for the people in it. And it's because it demonstrates really good storytelling. So I'm just going to talk through some of the elements that are in that video that make it work really well. And these are the elements that make up the human story. So these are the three key elements of a compelling story that help to engage your audience's emotions and to inspire them to act. So these are the same, blockbuster movies use these same principles to engage an audience. Just like every great Change.org petition that you have probably signed and seen has these same elements as well. So the first element is character. These are the people in your story. So characters that are active and not passive, and they evoke our interest, our sympathy, and our empathy. Usually we have sympathy for a character who's facing a problem, and we have empathy when they seek a solution. So usually in a petition, you are a character in the story, but sometimes it would be somebody else, and you should usually make it clear what your relationship is to the character and why you care about what happens to them. So the next element are goals and obstacles. So every good story has the characters face goals and obstacles. Goals are the things that your characters want for the future, and obstacles are the things that make it, that block them from achieving their goals and that make it difficult for them. So, if you think of any great film or story that you've seen, for example, Finding Nemo, it wouldn't have been much of a story if Nemo had been found right away. It would be a very short film. So having goals and obstacles sustains the plot and really engages our interest in a good story. And the last element is stakes. So this is about what we hope for and what we fear in the story. And it's the difference between what happens if your character succeeds and what happens if they fail. So usually, the more concrete these stakes are in the story, and the higher the stakes, the better the story and the more we're interested in the outcome. So in any good story and in any good fiction, we need to make it really clear what the audience is hoping for and what they fear in the situation. So I'm going to try using the chat to ask a few questions about the video that we just watched. So who were the characters in the story that we watched in the video? Could chat your answers, that would be great. Who were the characters in the video? Yeah. So the characters were Laura and Jordan McClin. And we know quite a lot about these characters just from a very short introduction in the video. So we know that Laura is a mother. We know that Jordan is a young boy. And then there's a lot that's very concrete in their story and a lot that people can empathise with. I think a lot of people would understand the way that Laura feels about her son and can connect with that. And because we're given some real texture of who these people are, it makes us interested in them. So there's also some really strong goals and obstacles in this story. So does anybody want to have a go at guessing what the goals are in the story that the characters have? There's some very strong visual cues as to what the goals are in this story, and something that makes it work really well. So Jordan's goal is to become a firefighter when he grows up. And we see the scenes of him in the fire station. And as Josh says, there's also a broader goal of getting the ability to try medicines before they're approved, and that I would say is Laura's goal, and applies to a really broad range of patients. That's right, and the obstacle, Penny has identified the obstacle, which is the FDA blocking treatment. So I was going to ask about the obstacle. So this is the thing that prevents our characters from achieving their goals, and the FDA is clearly the obstacle in this story. And there's also some really high and really clear stakes in this story. It's made it very clear sort of what we fear in this situation. What we fear is that Jordan is not going to grow up to achieve his dream of being a firefighter, and that he's going to decline very young before he needs to. And that is high stakes. There's also the access to treatment for thousands of other patients who have chronic illnesses, and that's also a very high stake. People going without treatment that could help them because it's not yet approved. And what we hope for is that Jordan will get the treatment that he needs, that those other patients will get the treatment that they need, and that those treatments will be helpful, and that they'll improve their quality of life and maybe extend their lives. So there's a lot in that story. There's a lot packed into a very short video. It's just 2.5 minutes, and we're told all of these things about Jordan and Laura and the situation that they're facing. And with our own petitions, we aim to do a very similar thing. Usually we're using text rather than video, but we're trying to convey the situation and the story of our petition very quickly and succinctly to an audience to get them to care about what happens in the same way that we all care about what happens to Jordan and Laura after watching that video. So I want to ask you all to open up the form, if you haven't already, at www.change.org/storytelling. And we're going to just take 5 minutes to start writing our own version of this human story for the petition that we're interested in working on. So if you open up that survey, you'll see that there's a few questions there that are going to help to kind of break down those elements and ask you to sort of start telling your story in terms of those different elements that make up a great story. So if you open up change.org/storytelling, you'll see these questions. So my character is, my character's goals are, the obstacles my character faces are, if my character wins, then what? If my character loses, then what? And these are designed as beginning of sentences just because the easiest way to kind of answer these and to come up with your own story is to just complete these sentences. So we're going to take a few minutes to do that and to work on that. You just need a kind of a sentence or two for each of these. And when you are done with that and you have your answers in the form, you can click next and also raise your hand in the chat so I know that you're ready to move on. So we're just going to take 5 minutes or so to do that now and start writing our own stories. All right, looks like people are nearly done, and that's all the time we have. I mean, you can always come back to this later on as well. I just ask you to reflect on sort of what you've written and make sure when you kind of look at it that when you read it, you've given people who are totally unfamiliar with the situation a really good reason to kind of care about your characters. So making sure there's enough detail and texture in there about the people involved to make sure that you give people reading it a real sense of who those people are. And I wonder if people found it easy or difficult to kind of talk about how you feel about the situation. You know, one of the things that's really powerful about the video that we watched is that Laura's emotions and Jordan's emotions come through very clearly. So when you're reading it back, just making sure that the emotion comes through clearly and it's obvious how you and the characters feel about the situation. And also making sure that you've made the goals and the obstacles that your characters have really clear to the readers. So making sure there's a reason for them to root for you or for the characters and to care about what happens next. So once you're really happy with that, we can look at the next part of a really successful story on Change.org, which is your petition story. So these are another set of key elements that make up every successful petition on Change.org. These are the elements that make it really clear to supporters why they should support your petition and why their support makes a difference. So there are three key elements. The first is the decision maker. So the decision maker is the person who can give you what you want. They should be somebody who's contactable. In general, it should be the most junior person who can give you what you want. They're also, and that's because they're easy to get in touch with, easy to get their attention. They have direct responsibility for fixing the problem, and it sometimes gives more senior people an opportunity to portray themselves as heroes. So if we think about Laura's situation, there was a decision maker that was very clearly identified, which was the Food and Drug Administration. And her petition also listed some other decision makers who were state and federal lawmakers. It's generally better to target a person rather than an organisation, and so the commissioner of the FDA, for example, would make a better target than the FDA as an organisation. The next element is your ask. Your ask is what you want your decision maker to do. These are all, the fundamental elements of a petition. So your ask should be a solution to a problem. So if we think about Laura's situation, the ask was for the FDA to stop blocking right to try legislation. And that was a clear solution to the problem of Jordan and other patients being able to access the drugs that they needed to help them to thrive. So in general, an ask is a solution. It should be specific enough that you know if you've achieved it or not. So you can tell clearly when your petition is done whether you actually got what you asked for or not. And it should be something that your petition maker has the power to deliver. The easiest way for a decision maker to get out of responding or to get out of being accountable for a petition is simply to say it's somebody else's responsibility. And it's a very common response that decision makers make. So just making sure that your ask is something that your decision maker actually has the power to deliver. And the last element is the explanation. So the explanation is how the signer taking action actually affects the outcome. So the reason why this is important is because we know that people take action when they think that their participation is going to make a difference. So you need to make it really clear why your petition is going to be able to make change. And there are a couple of reasons, common sort of reasons why a petition can be able to make change. One is that the decision maker is particularly susceptible to pressure. So depending on who your decision maker is, you may be able to cite examples of where they've responded to pressure in the past. Or it may be somebody who's obviously susceptible to pressure, like a politician who's about to run for re-election. The other way that you can explain how your petition will make a difference could be that something that you're going to do is going to mean that the decision maker has to pay attention to it and it's going to get their attention. So, for example, you could say that you're going to deliver the petition when it gets 1,000 signatures. And turn up to their office and make sure that it gets in their inbox and on the top of the pile of papers on their desk. So there wasn't really a strong explanation in Laura's story. That was one of the elements that was sort of not as strong, but there was an implied kind of explanation that lots of people supporting the petition would be able to move the FDA. So again, just like we did before, we're going to have a go at writing our own petition story. So if you clicked next on the form that you went to at Change.org/storytelling, you'd know that there's another set of questions there that's going to break down the petition story for you to help start telling this petition story to make a really strong case as to why your petition is going to be able to make a difference. So again, we're just going to take 5 minutes to start writing out the petition story, and a sentence or two for each of these questions is definitely enough. And these are the questions that you'll see there. So again, these are the starts of sentences, and all you need to do is kind of finish the sentence to tell your own story. So my decision maker is person. I'm asking my decision maker to or for something. This petition can win because why it can win. So if you go to Change.org/storytelling, the second page will have the questions to help you tell your petition story. Seems like people are nearly done. Before we move on, I just want to make sure that when you finish with this, you take a look back at it and make sure you really carefully evaluate what you've written, and thinking about things like whether your ask makes sense and contributes to your goal, and whether you're sort of confident that you've found the right decision maker. Usually, identifying the right decision maker is one of the things that people find the most difficult. And it may be that you kind of need to do a little more research to figure out exactly who the right decision maker is. In general, you also want it to be the kind of the most junior person who can give you what you want. So I'd say if you there's a few circumstances in which the president or the Supreme Court might be the right decision maker, but they're pretty rare. So in most cases, that's not the case. Yeah, making sure that you've identified something as an ask that your decision maker can deliver. And you've clearly explained to your supporters why their support will make a difference. All of that is really important. So next, we're going to talk about how to put all that together into a really excellent Change.org petition. And the good news is that you've already written all of the content that you need to create a really excellent Change.org petition. And all you need to do is put it together. So just to recap, we talked through the human story. These are the kind of three elements of a compelling petition story that help to engage your audience emotionally and motivate them to take action. So those elements are character, the people in your story, goals and obstacles. So goals are what your characters want for the future. Obstacles are the things that block your characters from achieving their goals. And stakes. Stakes are what will happen if your character succeeds and what will happen if your character fails in the story. And then we talked through the next three elements of your petition story. So these are the things that convince people reading your petition that their support and their support of your petition and them taking action will really make a difference. So those elements are your decision maker, the person who can give you what you want, your ask, what you're asking your decision maker to do, and your explanation. So how your signer will taking action will affect the outcome. This slide shows you how to put it all together into a really strong and really tight Change.org petition. So as well as having a really great petition title and a really image right at the top there, you want to spend your first paragraph, probably no more than 3 or 4 sentences, introducing your character, your goals, and your obstacles. So the first paragraph is really where you've got to make that emotional connection with your audience and convince them to take action on and to be interested in your petition. People are going to be reading your petition probably maybe on a mobile phone. More than half of Change.org users actually view the site on a mobile phone, or on a desktop, but probably reading it very quickly. And they're gonna judge it by the first paragraph. So you really want to make that an emotional connection very early on. Paragraph 2 should have your decision maker, your ask, and your explanation. So you're really putting all of the petition story about why your petition is worth supporting into that second paragraph to convince people very strongly that it's worth hitting that sign button on your petition. And then paragraphs 3 and 4, if you've still got people, if they're still reading and they're paying attention, first of all, you've done a really good job of the first 2 paragraphs. But then you can take a little bit more time to flesh out the stakes, really make it very clear what people should hope for and what they should fear in this situation. Give them a real sense of what the stakes are and what the difference that their support is going to make in the world. And so that's really it. So it's just those few elements. For each paragraph, you want no more than a few sentences and trying to make it really, really succinct and short so that you're conveying everything in the least amount of text. So just like the video that we watched, you want to tell a lot of story with very little actual material, with very little text. And if there are things that you're tempted to kind of include in your petition that aren't one of these key elements, you need to think really clearly, really carefully about whether they belong in your petition. Because the longer you make your petition, the more diluted these kind of key elements that compel people to sign and take action and connect emotionally become. So the shorter that you can make it in general, the better. So if you are still in the the form that we used, if you could hit submit at the bottom of the second page, that would be great. And that means I'll get a copy of your answers and you'll also get emailed your responses. Then you can actually use those responses to start building or editing your Change.org petition. So that's all we have in terms of content for the session, but I do have quite a few questions that have been submitted. So I want to make sure we've got plenty of time to deal with those as well. So if you do have additional questions, if you could put those in the chat, I'm going to start going through some of the questions that were submitted before the webinar, and then I'll get to your questions further on through the webinar. Right. So there was one question that was submitted before the session. It's actually very similar to a question that Penny just submitted, which is how do you tell your story without compromising your privacy and safety? There are ways you can do that. I mean, in general, a petition is something that's out in public, and you know, it is something that anybody can read on the internet, and it's something that ideally your decision maker is definitely going to see and is going to engage with. So you know, there are limitations to kind of how anonymous and how you can be when you're creating a petition. There are ways, you know, you could tell your story without including identifying information and by setting up different contact details for it. But it's going to be very difficult to kind of ever get to the like next steps of you know, negotiating with your decision maker about an outcome, or you know, doing media that puts pressure on decision makers without really identifying yourself. So you can definitely set up a petition that's anonymous, telling your story without including identifying details. But in general, we'd say you're more likely to be successful if you can tell a personal story of somebody who's involved. And it takes some courage to, you know, tell that story and to do that in public. But you know, it's also something that's very, very effective when people do it. Somebody asked before the session, how do you make your petition about a larger issue rather than about a specific incident? And in general, the best way to actually tackle a big issue that affects lots of people is actually with a personal story. So, you know, the example, Laura and Jordan's video, is a really great example of that. That was an issue that affected, you know, thousands of patients suffering chronic and terminal illnesses across the United States. But it used the personal story of one boy to create an emotional connection and to move people to take action on it. So, I mean, the answer, I think, is it can be about both. And sometimes the best way to tackle a big, broad issue is by telling a personal story about people who are directly affected by that. We've got a question from, a couple of questions from Hank about different aspects of petitions. So one is, what's the best approach to convincing the media to cover your story? We could do a whole other workshop on media, but I think making sure that your petition tells your story very clearly is a really good way to get media interest. And the best way to convince people to cover it is to do a little bit of research about the kind of local or the relevant media outlets, the journalists who cover the type of issue that your petition is about, and by finding some contact information for some of those journalists. So you can often find contact information for journalists on the website of a publication that you might be interested in. And often they're also on Twitter, and sometimes Twitter is a great way of reaching out to journalists to ask them to cover a story. And I don't think, you know, if you're the petition creator, you're approaching them about your own petition, you don't have to be very elaborate in your outreach. You can just say, this is my petition, I link to it, give them some one-line piece of background about what it's about, and let them know that you're available to be interviewed about it. And often, if you've identified the right journalists, people who are going to be interested in covering the story that your petition is about, journalists are really interested in Change.org petitions and very often willing to cover them. There was another question from Hank about what do you do when your petition stalls out with signatures? There was a helpful suggestion, actually, on the last question in the chat from Josh. If you're petitioning in council, sometimes media attends, so speaking before the body you're petitioning for is helpful. Josh, I would absolutely agree with that. Turning up to public meetings and speaking and bringing your petition along is really valuable. As is, doing a petition delivery can be a really great way to get media and telling the media about that delivery in advance of going and delivering your petition, or potentially doing some kind of stunt that relates to your petition as well. They're all great ways of getting media interest in your petition. Hank had another question about what to do when your petition stalls out with signatures. So sometimes petitions get signatures very quickly early on, and then they sort of plateau. And so one of the things that I think is useful for dealing with that situation is thinking about who the people are who are likely to be interested in your petition, and then figuring out how you can reach audiences of those people. So an example might be if your petition was something related to childhood obesity, you might think about where you can find communities of parents online, where you might find children's parents who are involved in children's sport, parents who are involved in healthy eating, that kind of thing, where you might be able to kind of reach those parents with your petition, and really thinking about not trying to promote your petition to the whole world, but really figuring out who it is who's going to be interested in your petition and where you can find those people to take action. Hank says that he's reached 469,000 signatures, is that right? But it has trickled to a halt. That's a lot of signatures. I would say that that's doing pretty well. Most petitions that win with 200 or 300 signatures. So really thinking about then what you can do to kind of really put the pressure on your decision maker at that point, I think is a valuable thing to think about. So we've got time for maybe one more question. If anybody wants to chat another question, we could deal with that, or there's questions that have been answered, been submitted beforehand. Somebody asked a very specific question about is there a way to promote a petition within Change.org? And there is a way for you to promote your petition to Change.org users. Once your petition has 10 signatures, you have the option to promote, to pay to show your petition to more Change.org users. And that is something that's available to everybody using the platform. So it is a way of getting your petition in front of interested Change.org users who are pretty likely people to sign petitions, and that's one way you could get more signatures on your petition. If you've tried other things, you tried the free ways to get people to sign your petition, and you drawn to a halt. So look, thanks everybody so much for your attention tonight and your really great questions and your participation. I am really, really pleased, really can't wait to read your stories and your petition. So if you find after this that you're still interested in getting more kind of help or support, You can always visit the tips and guides page on the Change.org website at change.org/guides, or send us a quick email at action@change.org if you've got a question or something you'd like to ask. We're also going to email out a link to a recording of this session, the video, as well as all of the slides that we used today. The slides also have a lot more information that we couldn't go through in the webinar about how to choose a great title, how to find a great image for your petition, and also how to find the right contact information for your decision maker. So there's a lot more information in those slides, so I really do encourage you to take a look through when those get emailed out. But look, thanks for your time tonight. I really appreciate it, and best of luck with all your petitions. Thanks a lot.